Brooklyn Beckham has recently found himself at the centre of a very public family conversation, and almost instantly a familiar comparison began circulating. It was not subtle, and it was not accidental. Television host Billy Bush, speaking to Fox News Digital, described Brooklyn as being in what he called a terrible spot. According to Bush, it is a position that closely mirrors where Prince Harry found himself after stepping away from the royal family. Not speaking to his father, estranged from his brothers, suddenly recast as the person who disrupted a powerful, carefully managed family image simply by refusing to remain silent. That comparison alone carries more weight than hours of panel discussions ever could. Because when someone like Billy Bush openly draws a line between Brooklyn Beckham and Prince Harry, it unintentionally confirms something many people have been saying for years. Harry's experience was never unique. It was never about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was about what happens when silence stops being an option inside families where image is treated as sacred currency. According to Bush, Brooklyn's decision to be honest about family tension has left him disconnected from David Beckham, Victoria Beckham, and even his brothers. The framing is that honesty came at a high emotional cost. And while the details differ, the emotional shape of the story is strikingly familiar to anyone who followed Harry's separation from King Charles and Prince William. In both cases, the public conversation shifted quickly away from why the conflict existed and focused instead on one central question: why didn't he just keep quiet? That question is rarely asked in good faith. It is not curiosity. It is a warning. Because in powerful families, silence is not neutral. Silence is obedience. Billy Bush also suggested that, as with most family disputes, the truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, even mature. But the idea of the middle becomes deeply complicated when one side holds immense power, institutional backing, access to media, and decades of carefully curated public goodwill. In those situations, the middle often becomes a polite way of saying everyone should have stayed silent to preserve appearances. In Brooklyn's case, old wedding drama was dragged back into the spotlight. Bush referenced the legal dispute involving Nicola Peltz's father, billionaire Nelson Peltz, who sued the original wedding planners from the Palm Beach ceremony in an attempt to recover a deposit. From there, the commentary quickly drifted into familiar territory. Claims that Nicola was difficult, the predictable resurrection of the word bridezilla. And just like that, the story stopped being about family dynamics and became about assigning blame. And once again, the woman at the centre of the relationship became the easiest target. This is where the parallel with Meghan Markle becomes impossible to ignore. Meghan endured years of almost identical narratives. Stories about her wedding, stories about her tone, stories about whether she fit in, whether she tried hard enough, whether she smiled the right way, whether she understood her place. Every disagreement was reframed to suggest that if tension existed, it must have been because she was too much, too different, too unwilling to quietly erase herself. What rarely receives equal attention is the environment these women are entering. David and Victoria Beckham are not just parents, they are a global brand. The royal family is not just a family. It is an institution tied to national identity, tradition, and power. When someone marries into that level of public life, they are not simply joining relatives. They are stepping into a system governed by unspoken rules, rigid expectations, and very little tolerance for disruption. Prince Harry grew up inside that system. He knew the rules intimately. He also knew the cost of following them. When Meghan entered his life, she did not change who Harry was. She did not suddenly make him rebellious or difficult or disloyal. What she did was refuse to normalize what had always been normalized around him. She questioned the expectation that suffering should be endured quietly. She questioned why cruelty was excused as tradition, and that refusal was framed as dangerous. Billy Bush pointed out that Brooklyn's situation appears almost identical to Harry's, with one key difference. In Brooklyn's case, the tension appears more focused on his relationship with his mother. But while the details may vary, the emotional outcome is the same: distance, fallout. A son portrayed as being caught between loyalty and love, as if those two things must exist in opposition. Harry faced that narrative on a global scale. He was portrayed as choosing Meghan over his family, as though choosing one's spouse was some shocking betrayal rather than the most basic adult commitment. The idea that a grown man might prioritize his partner and children over institutional expectations was treated as radical, even selfish. There is something almost darkly humorous about how predictable these stories have become. Powerful family, public disagreement, strong partner, media confusion, cue the outrage, the formula never changes. Only the names do. What consistently gets lost is the human reality behind it all. Growing up in families like these means your role is assigned early. Gratitude is expected. Obedience is rewarded. Questioning the structure, even politely, is framed as disloyal. Harry did not stop loving his father or his brother. He stopped accepting a system that demanded he tolerate relentless press attacks on his wife without protection. He stopped participating in a culture that spoke publicly about mental health while dismissing it privately. And that choice came with consequences, but it also came with freedom. Years later, Harry and Meghan are still here, still working, still advocating for mental health, veterans and charitable causes, still raising their children with intention rather than tradition for tradition's sake. That reality directly contradicts the narrative that they would fail without the institution. When stories like Brooklyn Beckham's begin echoing Harry's experience, it becomes harder to dismiss Harry as an exception. Instead, he looks like an early example of a much larger truth. Silence inside powerful families is often mistaken for harmony. Honesty is mistaken for rebellion. Billy Bush said, "It is sad," and he is right. It is sad that telling the truth still carries such a heavy price. It is sad that endurance is still framed as maturity, while boundaries are framed as betrayal. And it is sad that women continue to be blamed for dynamics that existed long before they arrived. When commentators say two things can be true at the same time, they're correct. Families can love you and still hurt you. Tradition can be meaningful and still damaging. Parents can do their best and still fall short. Harry acknowledged all of that, and instead of being met with understanding, he was met with punishment. So when Fox News Digital publishes commentary drawing these comparisons, whether intentionally or not, it validates the core of Harry's experience. This was never about drama. It was about boundaries. And that is a conversation many powerful families would rather avoid. If you found this discussion insightful, please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. Supporting the channel through Super Thanks or Buy Me a Coffee helps keep this space independent and growing. And I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment and join the discussion. Thank you for listening, for supporting, and for helping this channel continue to grow.